patrol job come up, and I was asked to do that. And I did that for quite a few years. I scheduled heat treat and automatic screw machines and all that kind of stuff. And then a few years later, well, things got a little soft and I had to go back to work. And then this guy in heat treat, he was scheduling heat treat and he had a nervous breakdown, and Lee Thompson come up to me and he says, "You want to go on management?" I says, "Well, I got to eat, you know." And so he grabbed three lots of tractors that come in these computer type with the holes on the side and whatever, and off to heat treat he went. He threw them on the desk and he says, "You are now the scheduler of heat treat." My heart went, oh my God. And I got through it. I had a lot of help. And Wes Mattson was the foreman, and Dick Bennett was the metallurgist, and Dick Bennett helped me out a lot. He gave me books. He sent me home with them books, and he says, "Read this chapter, read that chapter, read that chapter, you'll get an understanding of what's going on." And I did, and I stayed there for quite a while, scheduling parts. Throughout my career there, I did go out on the road a couple times. The hydraulic problem we had to fix all over the country. We had a hydraulic motor that run the power steering. What was that? Was that a GM motor? Saginaw. Okay, Saginaw. And we replaced it with a Charlene, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's an oily job. And we pick up tractors. In fact, I had one out in the field I had to haul in. It was all covered with dirt. Had to wash it off and whatever. And a couple of guys, Dave Littlegraven, who was also Division 4 supervisor, was on the road with me in Indiana for a while. And I had various other guys, and then I ended up doing it all by myself. And I had better luck with that. I didn't have to. I had one guy, he liked to stay in the tavern at night. If you get up in the morning and work all day, that wasn't my gig. But when it come down to the end, I'll get down to the end here, make this a little bit shorter. The last, I think it was about 7 years that we didn't have a full-time metallurgist. And anyway, the last 7 years we had good lab people, and I got away with it. Had one incident that cost the company a lot of money, and I gotta say I fought it. Most companies that I've been with since run on a monthly basis, and they gotta have so much dollars out the door or whatever. And we were building mower bars for a new idea of bush hog, and we had these gears going through the furnace. Anyway, they had to be on the line the next day, and of course we had a little trouble paying bills once in a while or getting the forgings in on time, so they were late. And of course I had certain pushes and whatever to make, and anyway, one of the supervisors come up to me and says, "Let's take the heat treat, the deep freeze and draw off them gears so we can get them to the grinder." And me and a guy named Jim Rezebeck, I won't mention the guy's name that made me do this, but anyway, he forced me into not putting the deep freeze and draw on, and ended up going to the grinder, Of course, I wrote this all down, and I had Jim Rezabeck sign this piece of paper, and I had the time and everything on a piece of paper, and because I knew it was wrong. And so we sent it to the grinder, and they ground them, they run them on the gear roller and send them to a line, and they loaded them on the truck. We put them in wood crates, put them on the truck, and they sent them to Coldwater, Ohio to be finished assembled, and come to find out all the nuts popped off. And so we went down the assembly line, walked down the assembly line, and they had opened up the door, and there was more of them with off. And I just found out that cost our company in the vicinity, I was told $100,000, but I was told by a guy that knows that was about a $400,000 thing. So that's one thing, politics in a company, when you don't have the power, sometimes it's like Dick Bennett. He told it the way it was. And that was, and sometimes you get bit on it. And I almost thought I was going to get hung on it, but that piece of paper saved my ass. So I will say that. And I had a fairly good relationship with Ray Blanchard. We fished the same waters. He actually moved to Decorah afterwards, about 4 miles from me. He built a big house in a 160-acre farm, mostly woods. Had 7 springs on it. We fished some of the same water. So he ended up marrying Mr. Sadler's ex-wife, and we had, I gotta say, we had a good relationship in that fact. Him and I discussed a lot of things in the past. He thought the company was going to go. I did too. We had 2 furnaces come from, I think, Coldwater, Ohio. We dug a pit, 2 pits in heat treat. It was $10,000 a pit. They allowed me to brick it. I don't remember what that money was. I was allowed to replace trays, and which was very, very expensive in a lot of the furnaces, and it kind of led you to believe that you were going to be there for a long time. They sent us out to Chicago to 2 shows. Ray said, make a list of what you think you want. We were kind of animated compared to what was going on. You get out there to the 2 show, and man, you know, we should have been spending money on ourselves. If Oliver would have spent money on themselves instead of using the money for other companies, we could have been outstanding. But when I went out there, we were way behind when it comes to machinery. And I think that and the landfill problem that we had for years, we dumped stuff up on the hill, the shaving pile. In fact, when I was a young man, I'd have to take a load slop bucket out and dump it up on that shaving pile with the forklift, the big forklift, and not knowing what I was doing, you know, who knew that was a bad deal. And I was in charge of plating tanks in the end, and we finally got OSHA to come in there, and they put in centrifuges, and we started doing things right, but it was too late. Talking about the lead pot, we had to hide that. Somebody here mentioned that, and I was kind of involved in that myself. But, yeah, it was a charade. Ray and I talked about it a lot. I've visited him quite often since we're not too far apart. He's been at my house, I've been out at his house, and I helped his wife after Ray passed away. I was one of his pallbearers. And anyway, when his wife was out there all by herself, she had broken her leg, and I had taken her to the hospital and to haircuts and all that kind of stuff. And she just passed away here last year. So that's it. Had a lot of funny things that I could have probably expounded on, but I could be here all day.
I was going to ask you if I could go before you because I almost fell asleep.
Well, when you heard this once before.
My name's Russell Corniger. I live in Rockford. I was born in Rockford. I started at Oliver in 1961, and that was back when the company would, like, 5 years it would start going down, and then the next 5 to 7 years it'd be up and go gangbusters. Well, anyway, I started on a radial drill down in number 7, excuse me, on third shift. Then I worked mostly drills and mills and bouldered down there and doing gear cases on the line. This is on second and third shift. And then I got a letter from the government, said that they wanted me, so in 64, I went down to Fort Leonard Wood and did my basic training, and then, well, one of the things when I did basic and was out of basic, this one-star general came through and he was inspecting everything, and he got to me and he says, "Corniger, where'd you work?" And I says, "Oliver Corporation, Trail City." And he says, "You know, that's a Cadillac of tractors." About all I could say besides shaking, big general, "Yes, sir." So then I did my thing for 2 years. And when I came back, I went back to work in number 1, running tracer lathes. I was on second and third shift, and at that time, they were running pretty bare on machine operators. And I run anything from the OD grinders to mills, drills, tracer lathes, turret lathes, just about everything you could think of. And then about 10 years of that, and I was asked to go on supervision, and I don't know why they would ask me. You know, I had no pedigree for education and stuff, but I went on, and at first I was alone, and then on second shift, and then I got Don Bloom. He worked as a supervisor, and then we got another man in heat treat, and then there was a couple supervisors down in number 1 on second and third shift. And anyway, so eventually I pretty much did the whole thing on second shift because I had to make sure that the trucks were all ready to ship out at 7 o'clock at night because they had to go to Coldwater. And that's about a 12-hour trip for driving truck. And I made that route a lot of times, but not driving truck. So, like I said, I worked 10 years in the shop, then they asked me to go on management. And then the plant went down, and I worked about, I think it was 5 years in Mason City building circuit boards. That was interesting. Then when Allied bought the place. They called, John called me up and he wanted to know if I wanted to go to work for him back in Charles City, and I said, sure. So I had to quit up there, and when I came back, I was on second shift. My gosh, when I first started on second, I had a scooter because they were running pretty slim on second. And I'd have to go down to number 1, check on guys, and I'd up in number 7 and heat treat and all this stuff. And I remember probably one of the first things that they told me, I said about heat treat. I said, I know nothing about heat treat. And they said, oh, don't worry about that. We got guys over there that know their stuff, okay. So they said, the electricity goes off, just make sure that generator gets going, because I think it was the Edsel. If you didn't get the electric up right away, you only had, how long did you have before it blow up?
Well, I tell you what, it got down to 1,400 degrees, you started to get there. And it started to fall, and especially on the GVRTs and the Edsel also, why it got to 1,300 and something, you gotta let it burn back, and if you get any oxygen in the back of the door of the GVRTs, it's a bomb. And I had an experience with that. Jim Rezebek was starting up on Sunday night, and when they started up, we used to run 3 weekends in a row, and then on the third weekend we shut them down, they burn them out, and takes the soot out and all that kind of stuff, and that's 3 weeks in a row was the best way to run the department, because bringing them up to heat and taking them down all the time, and it wasn't a week to week type thing. So Jim was burning the furnace out, and it's got to come through the first wall, and then there's a quench, and then you got to go through when the wall of the furnace starts to burn, you get another nice firewall there, then you can slide the door down. It's on a big chain about this big around. And anyway, I was coming in on Thursday, I was the supervisor there, and I was coming in in the morning, and third shift was about ready to go home. And anyway, he kind of lowered that door a little bit too early, and that door was about that thick, steel, and it's on a slide, and that thing blew up, and the fire come out of that and pushed him way back into a box, and he didn't have any hair on his eyelids. He's lucky he didn't burn his eyes. His face was red. But the heat treat was a place where you had to be on your toes. I had a few experiences myself when it didn't run, and believe it or not, I actually prayed that the electricity would come on.
Well,
The storms were hell.
yeah, especially at night when they came in. Like I said, that's where I really learned how to pray out loud. Because when the lights went out, it was like pitch dark. You could not see nothing. And I'd find my flashlight and I'd be heading for heat treat, and then the lights would come on, and I'd say, oh, thank you, Lord, you know. But anyway, all of them things that happened there, but I'll try to fast forward a little bit here. Then when they decided to move the plant out, they were doing a lot of cleanup on second and third shift. They would empty files and all kinds of stuff. So Andy Achenbach was not over inspection, but he's the supervisor there, and he had a lot of power. And I went back there one day. I came in early, and I says, what are you going to do with all these books and stuff? He says, well, we're going to pitch them. I said, so they're fair game. If somebody wanted them, they could have them. Well, he said, I'll check. And the next day I checked with him and he said, yeah, he said, if you want them, take them. Well, there's guys, they had a crew that come in on second shift and they'd be dumping files and everything else. Well, I took all the folders and everything he had in his office and I took it home. I still have it today. I don't know what's in there, but I know there's manuals on stuff from cockshut to heart par, all the way back to the early 1900s. And one of these days I'm gonna have to, well, today I knew I was coming over here and I opened this one box and I found 3 of my toy tractors in the bottom of this, the ones that were Spirit of Oliver. And I've got a whole bunch of the other ones that I bought and never sold or played with, or I had kids and they never played with them. I always bought something at the other store, you know. Anyway, so here I go to Coldwater. Well, they asked me if I'd go out there and help them set up the machine room and supervise, and I says, yeah. So I went home. I asked my wife and 2 kids that were home, if you want to go to Coldwater, we'll see, raise your hands, and they all raised their hands, so the next thing I know, we're out at Coldwater. And I noticed right off, there's a little bit of difference between the people in Ohio and the people in Coldwater, in Iowa, and the ones in Coldwater, Ohio. The engineering out there, they wanted to make sure everything was right before they would release it. Well, they didn't have that luxury in Charles City. They wanted to get that stuff out, so sometimes they had to push stuff a little faster. Well, the product was good. No Olivers and the white and all that stuff was super good. And the machine operators in Charles City, when they came into work, they came into work. Well, the machine operators in Ohio, we had some real good ones out there, but they just didn't move as fast as I thought they should, but what do you do? But they did a good job, okay? But I enjoyed working out there because the people were good, but I still always kind of thought the operators I had in Charles City were better, you know. The people I thought were a little better. I hope there's no one here from Ohio. That's the way I saw it. Well then, so then they came out with a deal where I thought they were going to move the plant down to Heston. And they came out with a thing where if you was 55 years and had 30 years rights, you could retire. So well, I was 55 and I had 30 years in, so I took the early retirement. And then I opened up, I took a year off, and then I started up a durable medical equipment business, and I ran that for about 15 years, and then I got tired of working and sold everything, my house and stuff, and moved back to Rockford. But I guess one thing that I noticed, and I hate to bring this, I don't hate to bring it up again, but I thought Charles City was probably one of the best places to work because of the people. And that was a big thing with me, the people. So, you got something else to say there, I'll bet.
Well, this guy over here said something about Dick Bennett, and he was a very smart man. And I heard a little story about him. I wasn't right there when it happened, but he looked like a comedian. What's that guy?
Which one? Let me tell you about Dick Bennett.
Okay.
Okay, One thing about Dick Bennett, and back me up on this, when he came to work, it looked like he didn't shave that morning. And somebody asked him one time, he says, Dick, how come you're not clean shaven in the morning? He says, when I go home and get cleaned up, he says, I get cleaned up for my family. I don't get cleaned up for the workers here. Is that, you agree with that?
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. That comedian, he looked like him.
Oh,
Come on.
come on, I'm 80 years old.
Oh, I'm 79. Anyway, he was at a tool show, and this guy walked up. Come on, mind.
Don't worry about it, I'll think about it.
Okay. Anyway, he walked up, wanted his autograph,
Oh, yeah.
and he gave it to him.
I don't know how you could forget that. You told me a month ago the same thing.
Well, maybe I should call it up on the YouTube. It's there. Anyway.
You want me to Google it? I know
Oh,
who you mean, though.
all right. It'll come up.
Well, I kind of forgot to mention